Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. Australian authorities are now saying the Hanukkah attack on Bondi Beach may have an ISIS link. They're also saying one of the suspects caught the attentions of intelligence officials as early as 2019.
And police release new video footage of the suspect as the manhunt continues for the individual who killed 2 students and wounded 9 others at Brown University.
The Department of Justice says the FBI foiled a bomb plot planned for Los Angeles on New Year's Eve. Officials say they've arrested 4 members of an extremist group.
And lawmakers will hear from the administration's defense team today as some continue to challenge the administration's legal authority to strike suspected drug boats, while Trump defends his right to protect Americans from the cartel war.
President Trump files a $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the network of defamation and election interference in a pre-election broadcast.
And the Department of Labor will release its long-awaited jobs report today after the government shutdown delayed its typical schedule. A senior economic analyst joins us for analysis.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Alice Tang, in for Steph. Today is Tuesday, December 16th. This is NTD Good Morning, and today's top news. We have authorities in Australia now saying the Bondi Beach attack, which killed 15, may have a link to ISIS.
They also say one of the suspects in the attack on Sydney's Jewish community had been probed over terror connections going back to 2019. Here are the details.
Australian authorities say the deadly attack on a Hanukkah celebration in Sydney may have been inspired by ISIS. That's according to the police and Australia's Prime Minister.
It would appear there's evidence that this was inspired by a terrorist organisation, by ISIS. Radical perversion of Islam is absolutely a problem.
The Prime Minister pointed to evidence investigators seized from a vehicle they say the suspects used.
I also confirmed that the vehicle, which is registered to the younger male, contained IEDs, but I also confirmed that it contained 2 homemade ISIS flags.
Police say the father-son duo traveled to the Philippines last month. The purpose of that visit is under investigation. Prime Minister Albanese said today Naveed Akram, the younger of the 2, caught the attention of authorities as early as 2019. That was due to his association with individuals who were later charged with terrorism offenses. Albanese said he had not been placed on a terrorism watch list, nor was he subject to any surveillance. Naveed remains under police guard. Police shot his father Sajid Akram dead during the attack. Earlier today, Prime Minister Albanese visited Ahmed Al-Ahmed at a Sydney hospital. He's the man who charged at one of the gunmen and seized his rifle.
Your courage is inspiring. Ahmed Al-Ahmed represents the best of our country. We will not allow this country to be divided. That is what the terrorists seek.
Hundreds lined up to lay flowers this morning in memory of those who were killed. The death toll stands at 15. Israel's ambassador to Australia also visited the site of the shooting on Sydney's iconic Bondi Beach, calling for greater protection of Jewish people in Australia.
What one can expect when graffitis are painted all over Australia, on synagogues, buildings, public buildings, calling for the death of Israel, death to the IDF.
Australia has experienced a string of anti-Semitic incidents in the past 16 months. It has prompted the head of the nation's main intelligence agency to declare anti-Semitism as his top priority in terms of threat to life. The neighboring state of Victoria has announced more than 2 million Australian dollars, that's about 1.3 million US dollars, in security and support for Jewish communities. It includes funds for private security, youth camp protection, mental health services, and counter-extremism programs. The Bondi Beach attack is Australia's worst shooting in nearly 30 years.
The FBI and Providence Police are asking the public's help in identifying a person of interest in Saturday's shooting at Brown University. They're describing the individual as a male, approximately 5'8", with a stocky build. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to the identification, arrest, and conviction of the person responsible for the shooting.
They've asked users to share the images of the individual and call in tips at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324, or again, 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can submit them online at tips.fbi.gov. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details on the story.
On Monday, law enforcement continued their search after a person of interest was detained, questioned, and then released. Officials said that the individual would be released from custody, but no new security alert or lockdown was reinstated. Mayor Brett Smiley of Providence, Rhode Island, said Sunday night that officials had no way of knowing whether the attacker was still in the city. "We know that this is likely to cause fresh anxiety for our community," Smiley said, but he said he believed the community remained safe. Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Nerona said the killer was still out there. "We have not yet solved this case, but I'm confident we're going to do that, and I am confident we're going to do that in the very near future," he said. Officials have asked that anyone with information about the shooting come forward. Meanwhile, additional evidence was released on Monday. Video footage so far has not shown a close-up of the individual's face. Officials said there was limited surveillance footage because the building where students were shot is an old building attached to a new one and doesn't have many cameras. Mayor Smiley alerted the community that officers may knock on their doors looking for more video evidence. Through reports, the two students who were killed have been identified. The first victim, Ella Cook, was a sophomore and vice president of the Republican Club. She was shot in a classroom during a finals review session. College Republicans of America said in a social media post, Ella was known for her bold, brave, and kind heart as she served her chapter. The second victim was identified as Mohammad Aziz Umarzakov by the Uzbekistan Foreign Ministry. In a statement posted on the ministry's Telegram channel, a spokesperson for the ministry said it expresses its deepest condolences to Umarzakov's family. Umarzakov's aunt told NBC News he was very kind, smart, attended talented and gifted schools. She said he wanted to be a neurosurgeon. Local residents gathered in the cold and snow holding candles on Sunday to honor the two students and 9 others injured. Participants held a day of mourning on campus and in the city. Brown officials canceled classes and exams for the remainder of the semester. Providence Public Schools still opened on Monday, but several private schools in the area remained closed. At least 2 students at Brown were survivors of previous school shootings. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Justice Department says the FBI has foiled a bomb plot planned for Los Angeles on New Year's Eve. Officials say they arrested members of an extremist group as they were unloading bomb materials. NTD's David Lamb has the story.
Authorities announced on Monday that they foiled an alleged terrorist bombing plot targeting the Los Angeles area.
The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force intercepted a scheme by members of a violent extremist group we believed determined to detonate explosives at multiple businesses on New Year's Eve.
Attorney General Pam Bondi said the FBI and DOJ prevented what would have been a massive and horrific terror plot. Officials say these 4 individuals, ranging from ages 24 to 41, were plotting to use backpacks with improvised explosive devices that would detonate in Orange and Los Angeles counties.
The plan stated that the IEDs would be complex pipe bombs. It included instructions on how to manufacture the bombs and contained guidance on how to avoid leaving evidence behind that could be traced back to them.
They are members of the Turtle Island Liberation Front, which Bondi describes as a pro-Palestine, anti-government, and anti-capitalist group. They're accused of planning to target companies at least 5 different sites, along with ICE agents and vehicles. U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, Bill Asaley, did not disclose the targeted businesses, but said they were logistics companies similar to Amazon.
Our investigation uncovered evidence in that the group would test the explosives in the desert.
The suspects were arrested on Friday in the Mojave Desert, where officials say they were unloading bomb-making materials. They have been charged with conspiracy and possession of an unregistered destructive device. The arrests come as officials in New York, LA, Miami, and other cities say they are on alert after a terror attack in Australia that targeted a Hanukkah event on Sunday. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
The son of legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle has been arrested in connection with their deaths.
The couple were tragically found dead at their Brentwood home over the weekend. NTD's Christina Corona has the story from LA.
Here in Brentwood, outside the home of Rob Reiner, where a tragic double-death investigation continues to unfold. Legendary filmmaker and actor Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle Reiner, 68, were found dead inside their home on Sunday afternoon after first responders were called here around 3:30 p.m. on Sunday. Officials pronounced both Reiner and his wife dead at the scene. Authorities believe both suffered fatal wounds consistent with stabbing. Data released on Monday morning shows the couple's son, Nick Reiner, 32, was arrested and booked in connection to their killings. According to jail records, Nick Reiner has been taken into custody and is being held without bail, despite earlier reports indicating he was held on a $4 million bail in connection with the deaths. Rob Reiner had a long career in Hollywood, first with his breakout role as Meathead in All in the Family, then going on to direct well-known movies like When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men. His death, along with his wife Michelle's, has sent shockwaves throughout Hollywood. Many celebrities took to social media to pay tribute to Rob Reiner, including actor Kevin Bacon.
Rob Reiner gave me a job in A Few Good Men. Sometime in the 90s, I guess it was. And I was over the moon to get that job because people may or not know, but this is Spinal Tap is my all-time favorite movie. And when he called me, I was just so thrilled.
Actor Elijah Wood wrote, horrified to hear of the passing of Rob Reiner and his wonderful wife, Michelle. So much love to their kids and family. Actress Mira Sorvino said, I am in absolute shock. Rob Reiner was a legend and a kind, brilliant man, a wonderful actor to work opposite on Hollywood, an iconic director. His wife, Michelle, was a lovely, generous person. I wish I had been able to get to know her better. The world has lost two tremendous humans. Actor Paul Walter Hauser said, grieving the loss of my favorite director of all time. A Few Good Men is the reason I became an actor, and Rob's filmography behind the camera is the reason I wanted to direct and still do. Authorities say this is an active investigation and will be sure to keep you updated as the details unfold. Reporting from the city of Brentwood, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And President Trump faces off against another media company. The president has filed a lawsuit against the BBC seeking $10 billion in damages. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the suit over alleged defamation in a news special that aired last year.
The 33-page legal filing accuses the BBC of making a false, defamatory, deceptive, disparaging, inflammatory, and malicious depiction of President Trump. The news piece was aired 1 week before the 2024 presidential election. Trump's lawsuit called it a brazen attempt to interfere in and influence the election's outcome to Trump's detriment.
Literally, they put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something.
The BBC aired an episode titled Trump, A Second Chance on October 28, 2024, 1 week before the presidential election. The suit argues that the media company intentionally and maliciously sought to fully mislead its viewers by splicing together clips of remarks that Trump made ahead of the January 6, 2021 Capitol breach.
Right here, we're going to walk down.
In the BBC program, editors spliced together 2 clips from the speech, creating the impression that Trump had said, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be with you and we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." In reality, the clips came from separate portions of the speech, including one in which Trump said, "We're going to walk down and I'll be with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol." And another, 54 minutes later, in which he said, "We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." Court documents include a letter from BBC Chair Samir Shah to Trump saying, quote, "Let me address immediately your speech of January 6, 2021. The way the speech was edited in the documentary gave a misleading impression of what you said. The editing unintentionally created the impression of a single continuous section of your speech, rather than excerpts from different points in the speech. This gave the mistaken impression that you had made a direct call for violent action. That was an editorial error, and it should not have happened. The lawsuit asks for $10 billion in damages, citing the value of Trump's personal brand and the injury to President Trump's business and personal reputation. President Trump yesterday also addressed the conviction of Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai.
I feel so badly. I spoke to President Xi about it, and I asked to consider his release. He's not well. He's an older man, and he's not well, so I did put that request out. We'll see what happens.
Lai is the founder of the now-closed newspaper Apple Daily. He could face life in prison after his conviction under Hong Kong's draconian national security law enacted to crush the pro-democracy movement in the territory. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Welcome back. The U.S. is planning to extend NATO-like security guarantees to Ukraine.
It's the latest major development in a fast-developing peace process between Russia and Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Erin Pazdar has the latest.
And I think we're closer now than we have been ever.
President Trump saying Ukraine is closer to peace than at any time since the war began almost 4 years ago. And U.S. officials on Monday telling reporters that the U.S. plans to extend Article 5-like security guarantees to Ukraine. NATO's Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all. If coming to fruition, such an agreement would be a major security guarantee for Ukraine.
We are currently working to have all this written out, and we are making progress there. I see the details from the military that they have been working on. They look quite good, although this is only a first draft.
U.S. officials also say Russia is open to Ukraine possibly joining the European Union. According to Washington, this would be the biggest expansion of the Euro-free zone since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Zelensky is offering to drop Ukraine's NATO bid in exchange. However, one key part of a possible peace deal is not clear yet: the question of territories.
There has been enough dialogue on territorial issues, and it seems to me that, for now, we have different positions, to be honest.
U.S. officials didn't give a clear answer either when asked about territorial issues on Monday. The U.S. previously recommended creating a free economic zone in Ukraine's Donbas region. Russia calls it a demilitarized zone, but Ukraine has previously said it's against that, partly because it wouldn't be clear who actually controls those areas. Erin Pazdar, NTD News.
Now to the ISIS attack over the weekend in Syria. U.S. military officials have now identified both American members killed in the ambush.
They are Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tovar, age 25, and Sergeant William Nathaniel Howard, age 29, who himself is the son of an Iowa police chief. Both men were with the Iowa National Guard.
A civilian interpreter was also killed, and 3 other guardsmen were wounded. President Trump is warning of what he calls very serious retaliation. U.S. forces say they've carried out strikes on 3 boats that were allegedly trafficking drugs.
Yeah, they said yesterday 8 men were killed in this operation.
The U.S. Southern Command said in a social media post the vessels were transiting along known narco-trafficking routes in the Eastern Pacific. It said the vessels were being operated by designated terrorist organizations.
It said a joint task force conducted the strikes at the order of Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. The U.S. military has so far struck more than 20 vessels in the East Pacific and the Caribbean, killing at least 90 alleged narco-terrorists.
Later this morning, lawmakers will hear from the Trump administration's defense team. The meeting is to address concerns about military strikes in the Western Hemisphere. We have NTD's Melina Wasteful joining us live. Good morning, Melina. What do you know about the key topics that will be hit on today?
Hey, good morning, Alice. Sorry, I'm used to talking to Steph here. Details are slim about this meeting because it is a classified briefing, but just looking at the witnesses that will be there, we can see that legal issues will actually be touched upon quite a bit. So attending this meeting from the Trump administration's team, you have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as well as the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. You also have General Dan Crane, which is the highest ranking officer in the U.S. Armed Forces. And alongside Dan Crane will be his legal counsel. So based just on that, it's likely to be a meeting to discuss and defend the administration's legal rationale behind directing these boat strikes. Now, this comes after several Democrats have doubled down on pressuring the administration to release that raw video of a certain strike on a suspected drug boat that killed survivors on board after the initial strike had already capsized that boat. So the Trump administration has come under fire from Democrats because of that. Now, this also comes as Democrats and a few former federal ethics officials have pressed the DOJ for a legal analysis about whether the department provided adequate legal guidance to those involved in these boat strikes. Now, President Trump himself has dismissed criticism, saying that he's followed legal obligations. And when pressed on this issue in the White House, Trump reasoned that because these drug smugglers have killed tens of thousands of Americans just over the past years, these boat strikes are justified and legal for his administration to carry out. Now, this also comes as there's a separate effort underway in the House of Representatives right now. This week, the House will vote on a resolution that aims to restrict Trump's authority to direct these boat strikes in the Western Hemisphere to begin with. Alice?
Thanks for the update, NTD correspondent Alina Weisskopf. President Trump has awarded Mexican border defense medals to 13 service members.
That's right. He says it's to honor the men and the women who have helped protect the southern border over the last 8 months.
And here today are the first 13 warriors who will receive the Mexican Border Defense Medal. I mean, we went from having millions of people pouring over our border to having none in the last 8 months, none.
It was actually first given out in 1918. So we're reviving an old medal that existed, was given to men and women who defended the southern border. So our men and women will be wearing that very same medal as Americans 100 years before who were asked to defend the sovereignty of our country.
Trump awarded the medals yesterday at the Oval Office. Border czar Tom Homan was also at the ceremony, and he described what the Trump administration has done at the southern border as a game changer.
In addition to stopping illegal crossings, the White House says more than 2.5 million illegal immigrants have been removed from the U.S. since January. The president also signed an executive order classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
But these are a direct military threat to the United States of America. They're trying to drug out our country. And in May, we executed the largest fentanyl bust in the history of the U.S., seizing 3 million fentanyl pills all at one time. Think of that, 3 million pills. It's amounted to billions of dollars worth of drugs.
And the House of Representatives will address health care this week after proposals by Democrats and Republicans failed in the Senate.
Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
House Democrats are pushing for a 3-year clean extension of the COVID-era Obamacare health subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year.
We need Republicans to join us in making sure that we can pass the bill. And actually, our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has a discharge petition that every Democrat has signed. We only need a handful of Republicans to sign it, and it will force a vote so we can extend these tax subsidies.
The Democratic discharge petition has 214 signatures thus far and would need 4 Republicans to join in with Democrats in order to force a vote on the 3-year extension. Republicans in the House and the Senate have offered 2- and 1-year extensions with reforms to the subsidies, but Democrats insist on a 3-year clean extension.
Let's go ahead and not give the profit to the insurance company, but the protection to the patient by giving them access to an account, a wallet, a purse, a pocketbook, if you will, that would have up to, pick your family, $1,000 to $5,000 to pay those initial expenses, but also do something on the premiums.
Some House Republicans have signaled that they're willing to address health care during the first quarter of 2026 through a reconciliation bill that will allow them to legislate without the need of Democratic support.
We have the tool
in the toolbox to make another unilateral Republican run at reforms that we believe will bring the cost of care down.
Also, this week, lawmakers both in the House and the Senate will receive a closed-door briefing from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth on the ongoing tensions with Venezuela. The Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado is set to travel to Washington in the coming months.
I absolutely support President Trump's strategy, and we, the Venezuelan people, are very grateful to him and to his administration, because I believe he is a champion of freedom in this hemisphere.
The Senate is also expected to pick up the House-passed National Defense Authorization Act that passed last week through the lower chamber. The bill is expected to pass through the Senate as it has the past 64 years and be sent to the president's desk for signing before the end of the week. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And thanks to Luis for that report. Now an update from the Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE says over the last 5 days, agencies have terminated and scaled back 55 contracts. In a social media post, DOGE said these contracts, which it calls wasteful, had a ceiling value of more than $1.5 billion. Some of the contracts DOGE mentioned include a $3 million Department of Education professional support contract for, quote, customized help and expertise on energy resilience for states, and a more than $2 million Department of War consulting contract for, quote, strategic transformation and enterprise project support. In total, DOGE says the agencies together have saved more than $230 million over 5 days. And Texas takes on major TV producers. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is taking aim at smart TV makers, some with ties to China, over alleged mass data collection inside Americans' homes.
Paxton has filed lawsuits against Sony, Samsung, LG, and China-based Hisense and TCL. He accuses them of secretly tracking what appears on user screens in real time. The suits claim the technology captures not just TV shows, but video calls, photos, and even security camera feeds, fueling targeted advertising without clear user consent.
Paxton says the practices violate Texas law and warns that Chinese-linked companies could be compelled to hand that data to the Chinese Communist Party, posing a serious national security and privacy threat.
The Chinese Communist regime's abuse of prisoners of conscience takes center stage in a petition circling the world with over 500,000 signatures.
And reactions pouring in after the conviction of Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai. Former Apple Daily employee says hope must endure in the darkest of times. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. Australian authorities say the deadly attack on a Hanukkah celebration in Sydney may have been inspired by ISIS, citing evidence including homemade ISIS flags and explosives found in the suspect's vehicle. And as the manhunt for the Brown University shooter continues, the FBI and the police in Providence, Rhode Island have released new images of a suspect. They're seeking the public's help to identify the individual. And the Justice Department announced yesterday that the FBI foiled a bomb plot planned for New Year's Eve in the LA area. Officials say 4 individuals were arrested, ranging from 24 up to 41 years old. They're members of the Turtle Island Liberation Front, which the DOJ describes as a pro-Palestine, anti-government, and anti-capitalist group. Authorities say the suspects were plotting to use backpacks filled with improvised explosive devices that would detonate at least 5 different sites in Orange and Los Angeles counties. And lawmakers will hear from U.S. defense officials today, addressing concerns about the recent military strikes in the Western Hemisphere. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane will all attend the briefing. The hearing comes after several Democrats doubled down on pressure during the administration to release the raw video of a strike that killed survivors on board an alleged drug boat. And President Trump is suing the BBC for $10 billion. He's accusing the broadcaster of defamation over a documentary aired just 1 week before the 2024 election. The lawsuit argues that the BBC misleadingly edited Trump's January 6th speech, splicing together separate remarks to falsely suggest a call for violence. Court filings include a letter from the BBC chair acknowledging the edit created a misleading impression. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Alice, over to you.
Hong Kong pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai was found guilty yesterday of undermining China's national security. The British government condemned the verdict as politically motivated and called for his immediate release. Lai's family says the trial has caused the destruction of Hong Kong's legal system under CCP influence. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
Hong Kong's High Court found former publisher and pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai guilty on Monday of conspiring to collude with foreign forces. It's the city's highest-profile trial under a China-imposed national security law and comes amid years of government suppression of rights and freedoms following the 2019 pro-democracy demonstrations. Lai is a 78-year-old British, Chinese and Taiwanese national. He founded the now-closed Apple Daily newspaper and has been one of the most prominent critics of the Chinese Communist Party. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says Lai was targeted for peacefully exercising his right to freedom of expression.
This was a politically motivated prosecution, which I strongly condemn.
She says the national security law was imposed to silence China's critics and undermine Hong Kong's autonomy, and called for Lai's immediate release. Lai was found guilty on 2 counts of conspiring to collude with foreign forces and 1 of conspiracy to publish seditious material. He has denied all charges. Lai's son, Sebastian Lai, says most people knew the verdict was coming.
As you know, the trial has been a destruction of the Hong Kong legal system. I mean, allegations of witnesses being tortured, no jury, 3 government-appointed judges, judges that, mind you, shout at my father on multiple occasions during the trial.
Jimmy Lai's family says his health has worsened after 5 years in solitary confinement. Sebastian Lai said his father has lost 22 pounds in the last year alone. The verdict closes a year that marked the essential disappearance of Hong Kong's democratic opposition under pressure from Beijing. The Hong Kong Democratic Party voted to disband on Sunday. Exiled Hong Kong activist Carmen Lau says Jimmy Lai's case is not just a tragedy of a single man.
It is a reflection of a, wider and, more brutal reality that, thousands of Hong Kongers are now under. We have almost 2,000 political prisoners in Hong Kong.
Lai now awaits his sentencing, which could range from 10 to 15 years, though some fear it will be more. Former chief of breaking news for Apple Daily, Edward Lee, says his heart is heavy, but hopes to continue Lai's spirits.
I believe the worse things get, the more good things we need to do. Otherwise, society will sink further. And as a Hong Konger, I don't feel that I can give up on Hong Kong, no matter where I am. So, in the worst times, we need to do the best things.
President Trump raised Lai's case with Chinese leader Xi Jinping during a meeting in October. Trump said he would do his utmost to save Lai. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, UK.
The terrible crime of forced organ harvesting is the focus of a petition making waves around the world.
More than 500,000 people now around the world have signed the document.
It calls on the group of 7 and other countries to take action against the Chinese Communist regime's practice of harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience. The petition was launched by Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting and the International Coalition to End Transplant Abuse in China in July 2024. It has garnered more than 506,000 signatures from 34 countries as of December 15th.
The petition seeks to compel governments around the world to take the lead in standing up against the Chinese regime's crimes of forced organ harvesting. The abuse targets prisoners of conscience, such as detained Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, and other ethnic and religious minorities.
Coming up, the Department of Labor will release its long-awaited jobs report today after the government shutdown delayed its typical schedule. A senior economic analyst breaks it down.
And Santa Claus brings the holiday spirit to a children's ward at a hospital in Rio de Janeiro. We follow jolly old Saint Nick as he hands out presents and brings joy to the families. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. The Department of Labor will release its long-awaited jobs report today after the government shutdown delayed its typical first Friday of the month routine. Joining us to discuss is Mark Hamrick. He's Senior Economic Analyst over at Bankrate. Mark, thanks for joining us this morning. What are your expectations for today's release?
It's going to be a mess, Carrie. It's good to see you because, first of all, we're going to have something here that we've never had before, and that is sort of half of the October jobs report. We expect the full November snapshot. What we'll get for October is, among other things, the payroll snapshot, the number of jobs added or lost. And the expectation broadly is this is going to speak of a lackluster situation with the job market. So if we go to the November data, maybe we get something like 40,000 jobs added. The unemployment rate either at 4.4%, where it was before, or 4.5%. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell put down a marker last week to say that he believes this data is overstated by about 60,000 jobs a month. So even if we get something that is above zero, let's say 40,000 jobs, you do the math with what Chairman Powell said, you're at minus 20,000. All of that speaks to the notion that the job market is not growing, and that's something that we've been seeing for some time now.
Yeah, so going back to September before the shutdown, the previous report, I believe, was just shy of 120,000. So you're expecting a third of the new jobs in this latest report?
Yeah, that's the consensus among economists, and the consensus, for what it's worth, is sort of split between 4.4 and 4.5%. But I think we have to acknowledge that, we've been going without federal statistical data during much of the shutdown, 43 days. And so this underscores the importance of finally getting to it. And whatever it shows, we'll be in a better place understanding what has recently been happening with the economy. And we know that there have been headwinds caused by tariffs, headwinds caused by the shutdown itself. But there are some rays of light heading into 2026, optimism that what we lost during the shutdown, some of that economic activity gets recovered in 26, not all, but some, and that we have the tailwinds from the tax cut bill. There's going to be a lot of money flowing into bank accounts from federal income tax refunds in the early part of the year.
Yeah, and you had gone into a few of the factors attributing to the slowdown. You mentioned the tariffs. What else might be at play to cause such a dramatic slowdown in new job creation?
Well, consumers are really stressed right now. And so, for example, the outlook for the holiday spending season is that we'll have a year-over-year gain in sales in November and December of about 4%. Now, you might look at that and say, well, 4%, that's not nothing. The problem is that inflation's running at a 3% annual rate. So 4% is just above 3 if you adjust for inflation. And the other part is that the wealthiest of Americans account for a large part of consumer spending right now. It's been estimated by Moody's, for example, that the top 10% of Americans are responsible for 50% of the spending. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell addressed this last week when he said something like the top 30% are paying for, in his words, I believe, way more than 30% of spending. Whatever the number is, it means that middle income and lower income Americans are financially stressed. They're dealing with elevated prices, the result of historically high inflation. And those who don't have the funds are scraping by just to buy what they need, forget about what they want.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the middle class and the working class having these challenges at the same time. So job creation down and prices, especially groceries and other things, with the exception of gas, mostly up. President Trump has made a lot of efforts to reshore jobs and bring in foreign investment, but the economists I've talked to said that that doesn't happen overnight, and we might not see the effects of that until the second quarter or the early summer. What are you expecting in terms of the impact of all of that foreign investment?
Well, let's say, first of all, that if we focus on the manufacturing sector specifically, manufacturing sector has not been growing jobs in the United States for some time now. And when we look at, for example, one of the primary private sector measures of manufacturing, the Institute for Supply Management, its business activity index has basically been flat or contracting for many months now. And the reality is that the administration has had to back off of the most severe aspects of the tariffs. A good example is seemingly waking up one morning and realizing we don't grow bananas and coffee in the United States, at least at the scale that consumers need them, and backing off of those. Yes, thank you for acknowledging that. But, these have not been strategic tariffs per se, but rather across the board. And so that's the damage done from all that. So I would align myself with those who say we're going to have to wait to see what the impacts are. And the reality is that iPhones, for example, are never going to be, totally produced in the United States. We're going to see just reshoring, but not onshoring of everything that the president has sort of said that we should expect to see.
And with the jobs report having that blip because of the government shutdown, did you look at any other signals to get a sense of what was happening as it related to job creation?
Yeah, we have had plenty of data from the private sector. It is not as superior as what we get from the federal government, but it's all sort of singing from the same hymnal, whether it's the ADP private payrolls, data that has been weak. We see very lackluster sector participation in the sense of the sectors that are adding jobs. We saw, for example, growth in the largest employer segments in ADP, but small and middle income, or I should say small and mid-sized businesses, were not adding jobs. And in the recent past, with the government data, it's been primarily healthcare and social assistance adding jobs, and much of the private sector across the board not adding jobs. That is not a strong backbone for the U.S. economy.
And Mark, just as we finish up in our last 20 or so seconds, any positive things that you think could be a silver lining as we go into Q1?
Well, as I said, I think we do have some tailwinds behind the U.S. economy. The tax cut, short-term interest rates have been falling. We'll see where long-term rates align or not with that. And the fact that the U.S. economy has been more resilient than many expected. Those are all pluses.
Well, appreciate you joining and breaking down what we expect later today to happen with the report. Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst over at Bankrate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry.
In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, President Trump expressed uncertainty over whether Republicans would maintain control of the House in next year's midterm elections because of his economic policies not taking full effect yet. Joining us live in studio to discuss is Republican strategist Angie Wong.
Hi.
Angie, so great to not be talking to you over the TV and to actually have you here in the studio. Welcome.
It's so great to be here in studio and to see you in real life.
Yeah, well, I know it's much colder up here in New York than it is in Florida, but we're still happy to welcome you. And with this Wall Street Journal article, I find frequently this interview happened in the Oval Office on Friday, published yesterday. Frequently, though, the way that Trump speaks, his cadence, his sarcasm, sometimes it gives a soundbite that may not express what he's trying to communicate. So I just wanted to get a sense of, were you surprised by the headline of the article and the message coming out of it, or do you think that, that's kind of what he intended to say?
Yeah, Trump doesn't always translate very well, especially into a newspaper. You miss the contours of his jokes, and he's from Queens, New York. So a lot of it is, a little tongue-in-cheek sometimes. But in this case, I'm not sure because, we just had a few major losses in November and December. It seems like his tone might be changing around the midterms because the confidence may be shaky at the moment. And, even though I know I have a good understanding of these elections that we did not win as Republicans, but there were also really small races, so I'm not super worried. But what I'm worried about is because of those losses, the Democrat donors are now engaged. And that's going to spell some issues for us come midterms and also 2028.
Yeah, politics like sports, a bit of a game of runs, a game of momentum. I want to go back to his direct quotes in the article. He was asked whether Republicans will lose the House in November, and he said, quote, "I can't tell you. I don't know when all of this money is going to kick in. I think by the time we have to talk about the election, which is in another few months, I think our prices are in good shape, meaning bringing down the cost of grocery prices. Obviously, gas is already down. And then he went on to blame inflation on the Democrats. So if a lot of economists are saying that all of this foreign investment, reshoring, it doesn't happen overnight, and we may not see the effects until the summer. If the effects come by June and the economy does start to improve, is that too late? Like in terms of an election cycle, especially with the midterms, what do you think has to happen in terms of the messaging about prices coming down to help them in the midterms?
Yeah, I mean, the consumers have yet to feel it. Remember, all of 2025, all the consumable goods were bought 6 to 12 months ago because that's just how the supply chain works, right? So the trickle down of the Trump tariffs and the big, beautiful bill and all the other efforts that the Trump administration has done, we won't feel it until next year, maybe Q2 at best, right? Because that's just how the retailers work. And is that going to be too late? Hopefully not. We've already seen gas prices go down. We've seen the price of eggs go down. But the reality is, Americans can't buy and afford the American dream anymore, right? We're completely overfinanced. We have debt, credit card debt, mortgages, etc., and they're just completely done in by all the debt. So we have to rethink and maybe even reform the entire thinking of what it is to buy into the American dream. It's one thing to buy gas and eggs, but another thing to buy a house, a car, education.
Yeah, and I think Trump really used the border as his key issue in the last election. Sometimes being so successful eliminates a talking point because he'll allude to it, but then people will be sort of like, well, what have you done for me lately? So is the economy and maybe healthcare, which is related to the economy, really what this election is going to be about? Or is it a little too soon to know what, in the lead up to the November election, what the situation will be in the summer?
Yeah, we learned that President Trump, after Zohran Mamdani won New York, his entire tone changed. He went out immediately saying, I'm the affordability president. He understands whoever owns the messaging on affordability, whether it's Democrat or Republican, is going to win the midterms because that's what all Americans feel. And somehow there's been a crafted message that the economy and affordability affects everybody, and that's how we're going to be voting come the midterms. He's going to own that because he's going to now be able to drive down prices. He's already driven down prices on lots of our popular medicines, for example. You're going to see more and more efforts. We see that Scott Bessent is going to be the new, affordability czar, right? So you're going to see a lot more. He knows how to do messaging better than any person on earth. So I know he's going to get that. But it's whether or not you and I, as consumers, feel it and really feel it. I don't see that really coming to fruition only because, we're stuck at a level at the moment of how much things cost. And a lot of retailers are not going to take a major price cut just to make President Trump, give him a full 4-year uninterrupted presidency, right? So I think there's going to have to be a balance there. It's whether or not you and I are confident by June, July of next year that, oh yeah, I feel like I've got more money in my pocket, or I feel like I've paid down some debt, or I feel better about my financial future. How is President Trump going to give all that to Americans? We'll see, but he'll do it.
It seems like he's always sort of playing a little bit of both sides in the messaging, because if he doesn't win the midterms and maintain the House, then he sort of wants to foreshadow a little bit. So he mentioned in this Journal article that it's not the trend to maintain if you're the sitting president in the midterms. I believe in that article it said W. Bush and Clinton were the only two in the last 50 years to be able to maintain in the midterms their majority. What's at stake?
Everything. Look, there's so much America First agenda to really cram through. And we already saw Congress this year, they were out for a few weeks, right, because of the government shutdown. There was nothing happening. So we knew early on, as soon as President Trump got into the White House again in January, he had 100 to 150 days to get everything done. And he tried, and we saw him running. We're reporters, we couldn't even keep up. But now that you're seeing retirements, early retirements, people leaving the Republican Party, the House, and also the Senate completely backed up, he's not getting things through fast enough. And if he doesn't win the midterms, he's not going to have a 4-year presidency the way he wants it to. It's going to be a lot of infighting. Even if we do win the House, Senate, White House, we have it all, it's going to be a slim majority. He's not going to get anything done. Everyone's going to be arguing.
All right, Angie, as we start to finish up, you're running candidates. As you go into this election cycle, is it about Trump? Is it about, like with Mamdani, candidate strength and magnetism? Is it, messaging? The margins are so thin, and we're talking about, purple states. What does it take to win and maintain that razor-thin majority?
Well, I like what Susie Wild said, the chief of staff. She's going to put Trump on the ticket, on the ballot. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? He can't run again, but they're going to do something. I mean, maybe even legally change the names of the candidate to Trump. Who knows? Like, they're going to put Trump on the ballot because now that we saw the special elections in November and December, we know we need him. We need him to win even the local municipality races. People come out for Trump. And I think that's going to be the winning strategy for 2026.
Republican strategist Angie Wong, so great to have you here in person. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Alice and Carrie here. And after FIFA began its latest ballot of World Cup tickets, a group called Football Supporters Europe has called on sales to be immediately halted because they say the prices are out of reach for many ordinary fans. Here are the details.
Soccer fans are getting angry about sky-high ticket prices for the 2026 World Cup. Football Supporters Europe, which represents fans, has demanded that FIFA immediately stop selling national team ticket allocations. The group says the sport's governing body is imposing, quote, incomprehensible ticket prices. FSE says a fan following their team all the way to the final would now have to pay at least $6,900, nearly 5 times more than the previous World Cup. Supporters will also have to pay everything up front in early 2026, just to secure the right to the tickets later.
A lot of people that were hesitating in traveling to the US are now saying that they need to take an extraordinary financial risk, especially if you're a family. Because we are in the region of $30,000 for a family of 4. The vast majority of football fans can't afford this, even in Europe.
To make matters worse, the cheapest seats will not be available to these loyal traveling fans. FIFA is keeping those seats for the general public and will change their cost according to demand using so-called dynamic pricing. FSE calls this a huge betrayal of real soccer fans.
We believe this approach is putting the very nature of the tournament at risk, because you need fans, you need the life in the stands, you need the color, you need the atmosphere. And with tickets that are going up to above $4,000 for the final, none of this will happen.
FSE says it's also the first time that group stage games will not all cost the same. Instead, FIFA plans to charge different prices depending on the fixture's attractiveness. That means fans of different teams could pay different prices for the same ticket category and stage, with little pricing transparency. Ivan is urging FIFA to think again.
They need to pause and consult their member associations and consult the impacted parties, including fans. If they do this and look at how much people are actually ready to put to attend a game to the World Cup, they will realize that they need to decrease their ticket.
And what are Americans saying about the high ticket prices for next year's FIFA World Cup?
Soccer fans in New York's Times Square and Washington, D.C. share their perspectives.
They're outrageously expensive. This guy would love to go, but unfortunately, us working class can't afford it.
I'd be willing to spend a couple $100. Nothing too crazy, because I live in a city that I'd have to travel to a different city to watch it, so I have to factor in those costs as well.
I'll give you an example of how I think it's gotten ridiculous is in 1994 when the World Cup was here, I went to all the games at Dallas. And I'm not going to buy all those games because there's some games I don't want to see and don't want to pay that much money for anyway to see. And it's sad because when I went to the games in Dallas in 1994, I had fun watching soccer, but I had more fun watching the fans. I mean, they were amazing and would stay after and sing and dance, and the personality of the World Cup, I think, if people can't see that because they can't afford to go, is the shame of it. So.
I think they're pretty insane, honestly. I've been a long-time soccer fan, been watching since I was a kid. I remember watching the World Cup back in 2010, 2014, and I was pretty excited to watch this year and go to some of these games, but even though I have adult money, I can't really afford some of these tickets, which is just insane for the everyday fans.
Yeah, so I grew up watching it with my dad and my brother mainly. I think it's just seeing the love they have for the game. It's more personal. It's in our hearts, just watching all these teams, just feeling the tension with all these teams going back and forth, seeing who's better, who's bad, it's just fun. It's a good way to bond with our family as well. But these ticket prices, I just feel like it's so ridiculous. It's too hard.
I was seeing 4 digits, anywhere between the neighborhood of like 15 to 2,500 for the locations that would have been closest to me, which were Seattle and the California one. So pretty steep.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. I'm a huge soccer fan, and I used to live in Seattle, so I was definitely considering going to those, but I just don't think I can. And it's also crazy seeing hotel prices go up at the same time. Like, Seattle's one of the highest. It's gone up by like 450%. And so the opportunity for people to come who aren't even American to come support their teams.
I was pretty shocked when I first heard the numbers. It's disappointing, especially for fans who might be really, interested in the game itself, but, maybe not in a financial position to, swing that kind of price. I feel like every year tickets for these kinds of events seem to keep going up a little bit more, but that's a really big jump from the last World Cup event. So I hope that's not a trend that keeps continuing in that way, because it's going to be pretty much unattainable for anybody.
Tickets are the same price as plane tickets. Hopefully it's not like that for the Olympics.
Yeah, no, good point. I think what we're finding is, and they mentioned it in this package, is that you want to preserve the fandom and the culture and the spirit of it. And of course you want them to make a lot of money too, because it costs a lot of money to put these events on. But I think the music industry in some respects has found a way to make sure that there are lotteries and other things so that fans can get
genuine fans.
Yeah, because you don't want a bunch of corporations taking out all the tickets and then they just give them away to their clients, and you got people in the stands who don't really care about the outcome of the game. You
And
really
can't sing along.
Yeah, you want the chance, you want all the color and fun.
That's the best part.
That's right, that's right. Well, hopefully they'll get it right. There's a lot of time left, but yeah, I could see the shock and outrage over the high cost of these tickets. But moving on to some friendlier news, it's the season at Hampton Court Palace over in London, once the home to King Henry VIII, so, probably not too shabby of a residence. And they have Tudor culinary traditions alive and well, just like back in his time.
We have NTD's Andrew Thomas, who has more on these festivities.
King Henry VIII was known for his appetite. Here at Hampton Court Palace, 14 different kitchens cook up traditional meals. Natalie Williams is a historic kitchen interpreter here. She researches historic recipes and works on them in costume for guests.
We're recreating Tudor history, Tudor feasting, by having some meat on the fire. We've got some beef, which we're currently roasting. We're also making some marchpane, so we're going to be making some figures.
Drinks feature spice-infused libations, beers, and different varieties of wine. Tongue and jelly, quince pies, and orange tarts were also popular festive treats.
So the sweet treats at court were quite special. They were something called subtleties. Now, subtleties were a centerpiece where you'd want to show off and show how much money you have due to how much sugar you can put on the table. They made stuff out of marchpane, which is basically marzipan, and they made stuff like chessboards or churches and sometimes castles.
Queen Elizabeth I once hosted holiday banquets in the Great Hall. Even William Shakespeare performed for King James I at the palace during the Christmas season in 1603. Host James Peacock says it was a busy time at Hampton Court Palace.
Nowadays we do most of our partying in the lead up to Christmas, but back then it was the opposite. Christmas would then start really on the 25th of December and go for the 12 nights, and there was always a lot going on.
Peacock says the festivities weren't just about the holidays, they were political as well.
Anyone who hoped to remain in power, hoped to remain in favour with the monarch, would show up at Christmas, particularly for at least some of the festivities. But they would hope to be around, particularly on the 1st of January, on the gift-giving day.
The festive fair is in its 10th year at Hampton Court Palace. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Looks like a fun way to get into the holiday spirit, kind of the way Henry VIII used to do it. I guess back in those days they had a very meat-heavy diet, and they drank a lot of beer apparently. So they had that going for them. And then yeah, marzipan was one of the fancy dishes, but it looks like a lot of fun. Everybody over there seems to be having a good time.
Yeah, hopefully we have that here in America too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we should be cooking over open spits and kind of
create some of our own traditions.
Yeah, wear those Tudor robes and all the bling. So anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed it. We've got to put a pin on the show for now. But look, if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see Alice cover, send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. She would love your feedback.
For On the Clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. I'm Alice Tang in for Steph.
And I'm Carrie Dunst. We'll see you soon. Thank you.